Greetings, Captain. I have decided to do a little addition to this. Now that the Star Trek Discovery is Strange New Worlds is entering near the end, and you probably won't see my review of the next episode until after the Disney trip, because the episode drops on the day of the beginning of the trip. So I thought to do, and that's the penultimate episode before the finale. But I wanted to discuss the problem with this season of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. I keep saying Discovery, Strange New Worlds. I think I've already kind of hinted at that before. Okay, so Skydance bought Paramount, but there's no mandate for changing the shows, so to speak. There's no mandate saying, "Oh, make the show more conservative or less conservative or something." There's nothing like that going on yet. There shouldn't be, and there isn't. Some of the fans are reading into this that there's already some mandate, and they're trying to make it more insensitive. I don't think that's the case. I think the writers just don't know what they're doing. I'm probably roughly the same age of many of the writers on the show. I'm not one of the writers on the show, but I'm the same age as many of the writers. I get the X generation precedent. These people we did not grow up with watching in context the original Star Trek. We were infants when the original Star Trek aired. We were watching the reruns. We had no cultural context for the original Star Trek. As infants, as growing up as children in the 70s and 80s, we had. I thought that would be interesting to come out and mention that as an update, having seen part of the Trek Yards review of this Spock episode, infamous Vulcan episode, and also the Jesse Gender one, half of her review, and the consensus in the things. I haven't watched the full review. I'll probably watch it, but I don't need to comment on the full review because I thought that mine was. Well, I'll probably watch it later, but I'm not commenting on the reviews. I'm commenting on what's going wrong, because as a script writer, editor person, I can tell what's going on. I can tell what's going wrong here. I'm not official, I'm not agented, nothing like that. Or otherwise I would be writing for Star Trek, and the shows would be better. They'd be more like fan films, right? But yes, they're two English degree, journalism degree. and actually the journalism episode affected me more as a fan than the Spock episode, because the journalism episode was done so poorly in terms of its editing and its slipshod sort of propagandizing thing going on with that. Whereas this other one was more like, oh, they're just making fun of Trekkies. That's what I thought superficially what was going on. I didn't get the undertones because I didn't get the context. What's going on? Right? So, it's an autistic thing. Didn't get the context. Mark's Cards, my friend, explained last night. The context of this story is that they're being racist in the Spock episode. You didn't even get that. Like the idea that you could zap somebody and make them, turn into another race and have their mind and their personality and everything. As some people pointed out in the comments of the other reviews, they're not acting like adult Vulcans. They're acting like children Vulcans. Which explains the Romulan lady, which is also kind of prejudiced too, because you're basically saying, well, the one that's the rogue on the ship has to become the rogue Vulcan. Why? I mean, she wasn't raised that way. Why would she become the rogue one? Why would she become the Romulan-like one? They can't say Romulan. And I was trying to point out in that other review, and I didn't quite make it make sense in my review. So this is kind of an addition to that other one. Is that in the original Star Trek, context is king. The original Star Trek, to quote your Discovery episodes, Ron, that was an episode. Context is king. Not a great one, but yes, none of the first season really was of Discovery. The Romulans they just they just wrote, you know, that they didn't have the makeup. That was the reason. That was the real reason. They couldn't just make up a new alien race, so they're just like, oh, put Vulcan ears on them and say it's an offshoot of the Vulcans. That's literally what happened. The context of that, of introducing Romulans or Vulcans. That's literally what happened. They just didn't. It was the 60s. It was a TV show. It was a BTV show. NBC. Yeah, same thing with the Romulans sharing the Klingon ships. The art department only had a Klingon ship. There's a Romulan ship. So they're sharing technology with Klingons. Because they had a model. They had a model. They didn't really make a lot of models back then. They started to toward the end. But that's all it was. It's just models. The Klingon foreheads changing. They got better makeup. You know, that kind of thing. I think I mentioned something about that. Context is everything. The original Star Trek aired in the 1960s. I found out about history, Cold War, and all that later on. It aired during the turbulent 1960s. And between 66 and 68, right in the middle of the Vietnam War. It referenced something in Vietnam which was not going well. We lost, incidentally. The Americans lost it. They gave it up. Yeah, it wasn't popular. It was extremely unpopular, that war. Yeah, I didn't lose. I wasn't there. I was a kid. I was an infant. I was 5 when Vietnam ended, so I wasn't there. But yes, obviously. When I was about 4 or 5, I was introduced to the classic Star Trek. About the same time. So it was in reruns, and the animated series. So, but yeah. So part of its context. In the 80s, the context of my review mentioned the 80s as well. Better makeup, better ships, better effects, better models, that type of thing. They also had changed the Klingons from being a stereotype, an archetype, and stereotype for the Chinese to the Russians. And Next Generation, they were more like Russians. And because it was a Cold War, and that was the baddie, the Russians. So Worf was actually serving on the ship. That was like a big deal. Worf's on the ship. His parents were Russian. His adoptive parents were Shinko's. Anyway, so yes, but yes, so they were doing that. Now the Romulans were sort of Asiatic as well, but they were sort of like the sneaky ones, kind of like thing. And then they reinvented. There were other races that they included too, like Cardassians and all that. And I'm not going into the different groups they were imitating because, well, YouTube would flag it because they say, oh, well, you're talking about so and such and such. But no, I'm not going to go there. What I'm talking about is the context, the story. So then you come to it was for about 18 years. Star Trek was rejuvenated between 1986, roughly 87, when Next Generation started, October 87, to roughly 2005. So it's been 20 years since there's been a new Star Trek. 2005, and Enterprise was the last one. Enterprise was at post 9/11. So, I'm going to get flagged by YouTube for saying that. But there was another war that was happening, that unpopular war, similar. Lasted 20 years roughly. War we lost as well. I was not involved. I was not involved. And yeah, so anyway, so similar. But yes, the second Gulf War, the second. Yeah, that's what it was. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about context. The new Abrams verse, the new stuff they're writing now, beginning with the 2009 movie, where everyone was streamlined, slick hipster, play some rock music, do the thing with the car, do the other stuff, make Kirk instantly the captain by the end, even though he's a cadet. Make them all like, they're just hip and awesome and stuff, and we'll just throw in Khan, but make him the wrong race even. That was kind of racist too. Reverse racist. Make him Cumberbatch, yeah. Then they had that weird, yeah. There have been a number of episodes that have tried to do Wrath of Khan, and we've been on that before. Of the 14 episodes that aired, 14 movies that came out, more than half of them, 2/3 of them, are kind of defeat the villain at the end. More than half of them. More than 1/3 of them. So out of 14 movies, that'd be like, I think, 3 or 4 were not about defeating a villain. That's it. Maybe you gotta not do that anymore. Don't do con anymore. Don't do that. At least Stranger Worlds is trying to, well, a little bit trying to do that. But they're still kind of failing. So as Jesse Gender Channel pointed out accurately, they're trying to be Lower Decks on Stranger Worlds. They just don't know how Lower Decks worked. I know how Lower Decks worked. Starship San Jose. No, but yes. But yes, Lower Decks was nostalgic, but actually really well written. I'll say that for Mike McMahon, even if he's aware of our fan films and messes with them. But still, it's good. It's good. But we mess with them back. We say, "Ha, look what we did." But yes, but yeah, my series is the Locarno timeline, where Nick Locarno survives and everything is all is well. That's fine. Okay, Nick Locarno timeline. But I'm not Robbie McNeil. I just look a little like him. Just to be clear, I'm not even. Fans were confused, but no, I'm not. I'm not his clone or any relation. Not even a cousin to Robbie McNeil. And we could go on the Academy tangent. I'm not going to. I'm going to stick to the timeline, to this story, why they're screwing up, and why they're doing an Academy one set in the future, Discovery's future, and yet all of the current episodes since 2017, since Discovery, really, the new show is separated by 2017 to now, 8 years. The new shows have all had the problem the Abrams movies kind of did. Make everyone act like petulant children, make them obnoxious, have them run around and do goofy stuff and be promoted for their goofy stuff, and be a little bit insensitive and jerky. So the episode's jerkiness on this episode of Spock didn't strike me because as much as it should, because frankly I didn't notice really, because they're like that anyway. The changes to their personalities wasn't all that different, because they have been trying to make Pike off as a doofus, so that when his character gets killed or zapped or whatever, and he gets in the radiation thing in the finale, they can be like, oh, okay, we didn't like him anyway. It's the old, well, we want to write this character out trope from years ago. That's what they're doing. Yeah, the old trope is like, oh, I killed this character because my character's not cool. Oh yeah, I don't like my character. Make him a jerk so nobody misses him. That's an old trope they've been doing. They got that rom-coms and stuff. I took this Vulcan episode to be more of a rom-com, and kind of isn't. So I think part of the problem with your and this is just a rant about the episodes. The problem is the writers don't really know what they're doing, and I suppose I could summarize that and put out the feeler that in the story, the writers, the way the production works in Hollywood, is you've got the executive producer puts up the money for something, and there's an awful lot of executive producers on that show. There's like 4 or 5 of them. They're clearly also in the writing room, which they shouldn't be, and the mandate isn't necessarily for them to be less woke. That's not what's happening, because that wouldn't be happening yet, right? It's like this season was written and filmed over a year ago, and it was released now, but it was a year ago. They didn't have any mandate at that point. They went through this on their own. They went in this direction on their own. It wasn't a studio saying to do it. There's an old ancient expression, even though my grandmother who said it wasn't a very good cook, Grandma Knapp. Well, she did a lot of other cool stuff. She's a pianist and all that other stuff, but cooking not so much. She said too many cooks spoiled soup. That's the old expression. Too many cooks spoiled soup. There's too many writers and producers. Too many producers playing writer on the show. And producer, under producer is your director. Director takes an episode that's been written and films the episode. You have a director of photography, that's the person screwing up on that other episode, filming all the visuals all messed up. But the director told him to not look at the camera, I guess. Might be a good idea to look at the camera. Under that, you got your head writer, the writer's room, directing the writer's room, showrunners or producers. That's the same thing. Producer. Showrunners, producers. The showrunner is also director. That's probably a problem, because then there's nepotism. They can't go back and forth. There's definitely too much micromanaging on this show. They don't know the characters. Discovery had the same problem, but for different reasons. Discovery's problem was they didn't do the characters enough. So they're overcompensating because they heard that fan backlash. And they're making the characters in Strange New Worlds, which is a spin-off of Discovery, too much of the characters. In the original Star Trek, you didn't know much about all of the characters. Like Sulu and Chekhov are relatively out there, who were a little bit. But you really didn't know the original crew that much. But Discovery doubled down, and you don't know anything about the other crew until the final season, in which they mentioned one of them like starships. I can't name any of the other Discovery people, except for the captain on that show. The captain and Sarah, all the three main ones, yes. But the underlings, who were the other underlings? Who were the lower decks? So this show is trying to be like Lower Decks. Probably because it's got some of the writers from Lower Decks on it. That's why, Jesse. That's why. They got some Lower Decks guys writing this. Yeah, you do. But they don't know how to write a military starship crew. They know how to make a fun, silly starship crew. But yeah, in the old Star Trek and Kirk time and the Next Generation with Picard time, they didn't do stuff like that. They didn't act out of turn. They didn't throw temper tantrums on the bridge or in sick bay or whatever. They didn't throw temper tantrums in 10 Forward. They would have... The original show, they never would have put up with that, because those are boomers that wrote those stories. They wouldn't have put up with that stuff. Let's say, the kid's acting weird. And yeah, so Kirk was a boomer too. And Kirk was a boomer, and he's still around, 95 now. He would have been a boomer, but yeah, they were. So they wouldn't have behaved like that, and that's one of the problems with the show, is that they're inconsistent. So when they started to be inconsistently super smart, it was like they were drunk or silly and stuff, or goofy, more so than more intelligent. They were just goofy. And like one of them pointed out in the comments, they were acting like Vulcan children. Which is not to say that all children are necessarily illogical. Some of them probably aren't, but in this case, yes. So part of the problem, yeah, you have yeah, it wasn't a mandate. It's just written poorly. The whole season's been kind of written poorly. If half the crew would have been drummed out of Starfleet immediately if they were actually a TNG crew. Pike would have been declared compromised like 2 seasons ago. They said, okay, you're obviously stressed out over that weird incident on Barath. You can't be the captain anymore. So you're just not. As for his girlfriend Batel going half alien, half Gorn, they wouldn't allow that. What? And the Gorn thing is dumb anyway. So in my fan films, I attempted to fix some of that. Well, retroactively, by having them. There's an episode where that comes up again in my series in the 2403 story. And it comes up again because it mutates on a ship, and in the nutshell, in the story, they become like zombie things running around, and they have to stop the zombies creatures. But Dr. McCoy, they play a file. Dr. McCoy finds out the virus, those Gorn from Strange New Worlds, they had Regulon bloodworms, and they had some other virus, Nintendosis, that they also had, that mutated. And the reason they had this other virus is it was making them act like children and fools running around, and other crazy people. So the Gorn, and then the Gorn life cycle with the alien babies popping out, is simply the virus. They're parasites, and it's Regulon bloodworms. And Mark Cartwright's that idea said that would actually fix that Gorn story if they did that. Said, oh, they're not the Gorn. They're a species of infected Gorn, and here's how we cure them. And they need to do that. They need to fix that, because that's not the Gorn. Those guys are not the Gorn. And also, as somebody else pointed out, that's kind of racially insensitive thing too. They're making them a metaphor for some current group of. Well, the metaphors are okay in Star Trek, but when you kind of, yeah, you get insensitive and you say like, these Gorn things that are killing people are a metaphor for some kind of learning different group, let's say. They're not really, but they're kind of implying it. That's messed up because that's just like that doesn't make sense either. They're not parasitic. It makes no sense. My guess is what they're really spoofing is alien immigrants, which is messed up too. That has to be it, because it can't be just like disabled people. Half the Trekkie population is going to be that. That doesn't make sense. You're going to disenfranchise all your fans. That's not what's going on. It's immigrant. Yeah, it has become. It's not a mandate, though. I think it's not. It's not a mandate. I think what's going on is they just don't know how to write the stories post the writer's strike, which was a couple of years ago. That writer's strike really did a number on them, and those people that actually knew what they're doing left. They didn't come back. They got the hack writers that don't know what they're doing. Which would beg the question: would Kal Kat work for Strange New Worlds? And I would say, well, if you just, as a showrunner, yes, I would rewrite it. I would have to say, this is the end of the season, and yeah, we're just gonna end it. We're gonna stop. Now this is gonna open up with Pike in a wheelchair because the thing zapped him, and Kirk's gonna take over. The end. No, I'm not the showrunner. Don't worry about it. Obviously not. Anyway, so there's just it's kind of a mess over there. It is funny that the journalism episode that was more of a kind of not upsetting, but more odd than more annoying to me than anything than the Spock one, because I kind of saw the superficial overlay of, oh, it's funny, Patton Oswalt is in it, and they're acting goofy. But as someone pointed out in one of the comments on the Gender site, Jesse Gender site, someone pointed out, they made Pike's Vulcan act like the guy from Conehead, Aykroyd's character, and I was like, yeah, it kind of was. That's not very logical at all. Conehead was, he was silly. Yeah, he was very silly. Conehead. Old school there. I remember the Coneheads. The Conehead movie, not very good. But the Conehead show on Saturday Night Live was a little better. The idea being that they were representing goofy fans, basically, of their show, mocking it. Mocking the fans with Spocks. Yeah, the Romulan thing doesn't make... The Romulan thing is actually more disturbing than the other stuff if you think of it in a racial context. Because they're basically saying, not only are these other guys Vulcans, but this one is evil because she's merely an augment. That's actually messed up. That's like saying, well, she was raised... Mark Swartz pointed this out. If the example would be if Hitler or Mussolini or something, if they were born and raised as a clone somewhere else, like cloned and recreated, would they still be nuts? Would they still want to take over the world and be psychotic and whatever? Or would they be completely different? They'd be like an artist or whatever. Yeah, you can't just, and on the flip side of that, you can't just, no, they wouldn't. But on the flip side of that is, you can't just make somebody into something else by spraying with a shot or a pill. Doesn't make any sense. That wouldn't, their genetics wouldn't change them mentally like that. And also the Uhura character is kind of evil in the episode because she literally like brainwashes the boyfriend, who was the court reporter in the last one. Yeah, so that's messed up. And they didn't fix him, I don't think. They left him that way. I wouldn't even think she could perform a mind meld. As someone else pointed out, I think of Trek Yards, their review, they pointed out how could they, and these other one pointed out as well, same thing. How could, considering that, and Jesse Gender pointed out this a little better, pointed it out, like, how could they have the learning not to lie, one of the things, and learning to have logic was entirely a trained trait of the Vulcans. The Vulcans were emotional until the Surak, their spiritual leader. They've trained themselves to be logical and not to lie. Spock has said, "I'm incapable of lying," but then he was lying. So, but yes, no, he's not incapable of lying. He just says that just to say it. Tuvok was good at that too, as they pointed out as some other people pointed out in the reviews. Yeah, so it's like Vulcans can be very emotional. Some of the Trek people pointed out in some of their DC Fontana books years ago, some of the books about the Spocks and the Vulcans and stuff, pointed out a number of things that were goofy, the Pon farr ritual and all that, which is kind of hinted at but not shown in the story. I guess that's kind of what that Laon scene with the dance into the fight scene that leads into the dance scene. It's kind of like that. It's kind of an implicit Pon farr. It isn't that the Pon farr, it's like DC Fontana said, it isn't that Vulcans can't mate every 7 years, because that would be stupid and it would be very unhealthy for them to do that. It's that they can. They just choose not to. That's what's messing them up every 7 years. Well, good point. The late DC Fontana. It's not that they can't. It's that they choose not to. And it's not that they can't be emotional. They choose not to. And it's not that they don't have emotions. As they suppress their wild emotions, which are more intense than humans. They suppress them. A Vulcan, it's in Star Trek Motion Picture. Spock tries to get the Kolinar. So yeah, the idea that the hypospray turns them immediately into disciplined, trained Vulcans is ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Yes, it is ridiculous. There. There's the rant. Yeah, I didn't get the story. This is more on the Vulcan episode. More on and they write the characters really poorly. Like, for them showing Spock romance with Laon is just like them poorly writing that character doing that. It doesn't make sense. Spock having a sister makes no sense. It's not that Spock's sister is a black lady. That has nothing to do with it. It's that it doesn't make sense. That even canon-wise, it just doesn't make sense. Spock, when they introduce other things like like Cyborg or whatever, they didn't intend to do that. The writers change things in stories. It's not it's not so it's this is what we're gonna do, and we do it. And the director could decide not to do the changes in the timeline. Uhura's character is rather different than they're all rather different. The only way this Discovery timeline, Abrams-verse, Kelvin-verse even works, Kelvin-verse, and I'm going to call this a series since 2017 and on. Kelvin-verse is those weird young Kirk stories, and this is the Goldsman-verse, because they keep a Goldsman, along with the other stuff that's going around, and Lower Decks is the McMahon-verse. These are all a different timeline. They're connected, but it's a multiverse. It's a multiverse, and they're not connected. But still, on a military ship, you're supposed to behave like you're on a military ship. Literally, the whole crew's basket cases, they'd all be kicked out of the fleet. Hence, the Turnabout Intruder reference. Yes. Captain Patel would be like the Turnabout Intruder lady. She would be kicked off the ship because she's gone nuts, and they're trying to protect her with a Borg or whatever. And that. And I'm going to excuse the Commander Riley stuff because he's Commander Riley. And with Patton Oswalt, because, that sexual charisma that is Patton Oswalt. No. That was actually pretty funny. And so as a rom-com on the surface, it was fine. But yeah, the racial undertones that clearly were going on were like, oh, yeah. It reminded Mark's Cards of, and I don't think he saw the full episode. I don't think he did. I mean, he might have seen enough of it, basically, and turned it off. But yeah, the idea being that Yeah, the idea being it reminded of Code of Honor, which was that episode where they go to that Zulu planet where they're pseudo Zulu planet where they're really really offensive stereotypes of African men, and they yeah, Next Generation episode, second episode of the next. I have to make it now. Yeah, they didn't know what they were doing back then. They really really didn't. It was awful. It was offensive. It has been worse. They did some other ones that were like that. But yes, Turnabout Intruder was also offensive. And we've been there. But yeah, at least in the fan films we try to be LGBTQ friendly and not racially messed up, not racist, not prejudice, and definitely try to make it woke, because Star Trek was woke from the beginning. So yeah, I don't think they're the mandate. I think the writers are just poor at what they're doing. Just poor at what they're doing. And the director's letting them. And the producer's letting them. Probably because they're probably related to the directors and the producers. That happened on Voyager and DS9 too. And Next Generation a little bit as well. But it really happened on Voyager a lot, because Kate Mulgrew and Jerry Ryan were literally dating two of the producers that were unmarried at the time. So yeah, that's how they got hired. They were dating the producer. Good for them. Huh? Anyway, so yes. Yes. Good look at that. I don't think they ended up together afterward though. And there was a third one, Roxanne Biggs Dawson, who was married to a guy from Deep Space Nine. So, Case Biggs. Yeah. So that's how she got the job. I'll go over to the. Yeah, I want my wife to audition over her. Actually, Next Generation did the same thing. Denise Crosby, Bing Crosby's kid, right? Yeah, I think she is. Yeah. Oh, give my kid a part in this. Okay. And of course, Patrick Stewart was a British actor they knew from. And Shatner had been in westerns. It goes back to the originals, right? Shatner and DeForest Kelley and Leonard Nimoy were all in westerns. Walter Koenig may have been in one or two of those too. Westerns. But yeah, so Disney. Off to Disneyland. So, Kal Kat, you've completed the entire, 3 episodes. Well, you've completed half a season of Starship Locations 2025, 2026. What are you going to do now? I'm going to Disneyland. Do 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 do.